Hello, I am the voice of an artificial intelligence, and I will translate into English a presentation by Carmelo Dorda, where he explains a fundamental concept of essentiality in small-scale fisheries, multi-species, and multi-gear. The original version is available on the website pscavable.com. The concept of fishing essentiality stems from the necessity to determine the importance of each of the species caught in a multi-species fishery. It is a concept that has been thought out, developed, and refined over a period of more than 20 years. It was published in a scientific journal in February 2022, as you can see in the reference indicated. In this video, I will provide an explanation of the fundamental concepts. Should viewers wish to expand their knowledge further, they are invited to access additional videos on essential topics, which are indexed in La Escuela of pscavable.com. The concept of essentiality measures the importance of each species in a fishing community where there are several target species that receive the primary effort. Many accompanying species are caught as a complement and almost no species discarded. In addition, there is usually a polyvalent fleet capable of adapting fishing gear and techniques to the seasonality of the biology of the species caught, alternating harvests or periods as appropriate, and crews that could use different vessels throughout the year, generally owned by the same fishing unit, and that respond to the concept of artisanal fishing unit. In other words, ships do not always behave as productive units. In fact, boats function as fishing tools that can be exchanged, modified, adapted. They are not usually those rigid entities that limit and set the fishing strategies of their crew entirely, as is the case in industrial fishing. Fishers are autonomous agents who freely determine the type and fishing method they want to conduct, and depending on that preference and the fishing gear they have, they could use 1, 2, or more boats to achieve their goals. This quality determines the degree of versatility, polyvalence, and multi-specificity of the many fishing enclaves. In this way, an artisanal fishing unit, AFU, is understood as a set of boats, fishers, and gears that are grouped associatively to carry out various types of fishing. Seasonality is a typical characteristic of artisanal fisheries. The usual fishing grounds where they carry out fishing activity are usually no more than 60 miles from the home port, a circumstance that forces them to adapt to the natural cycles of nearby habitats. Thus, the intensity with which a species is exploited usually fluctuates seasonally and will be determined, firstly, by its abundance in the environment. But this abundance does not only depend on fisher mortality. Each species has its own rates of reproduction, growth, and natural mortality. And to all this, their own cycles of dispersal, migration, and aggregation are added that make them more or less vulnerable to fishing gear throughout the year. In addition, regardless of the natural abundance of a species, the intensity with which it is fished will depend on aspects such as the appropriate knowledge to exploit it, the possession of effective fishing gear, the atmospheric state of the fishing grounds, the regulatory management of the fishery, and the fluctuating market value. All these variables influence the fisher's decision when designing their own fishing strategy. Thus, we find many examples of fishing units that diversify their activity by complementing, alternating, or redistributing their fishing effort between several species throughout the year. Some last for many months, others appear and disappear abruptly, but all show peaks from greater to lesser exploitation. In this type of fisheries, not all species usually have the same interest or the same importance for the stable and profitable maintenance of fisheries. The degree of importance is determined by the intensity with which fishing is carried out, and this intensity, as we have already seen, depends on a series of ecological, biological, fishing, and commercial factors. Thus, according to varying degrees of importance, species of fishing interest can be divided into 3 categories: essential, fundamental, and complementary species. The first 2, essential and fundamental, are basic target species for the maintenance of fishing activity throughout the year. Their number per fishing community does not usually exceed 10, and they usually generate around 70% of the economic income from fishing. These species determine local fishing strategies and support the intensity and generation of income from fishing activity. In an annual period, the number of essential species is usually no more than 4, but they account for 35 to 50% of fishing revenues. Fleets, gears, and fishing methods evolve through them. The stability and income generated from fishing is based on this type of resources that vary according to fleet polyvalence, with an abundance that depends on the state of their habitat and their level of exploitation, and essential because if they are lacking, the fragile balance that regulates seasonality in fishing strategies is broken, leading to an increase of effort towards other species that have already been, or indeed will be fished throughout the year. However, the essential species cannot sustain the fishing industry by themselves, not even with the contribution of the complementary ones. They need between 1 and 5 species, either seasonal or annual, which have a similar capacity as those essential to create and evolve specific fishing strategies that allow the partial or total derivation of effort at certain times of the year. These fundamental species have many similarities with the essential ones, but whether due to their low biomass, lack of seasonality, limited vulnerability, or insufficient commercial income generation, they do not reach the level of importance of the essential ones. Even so, they usually represent between 15 and 30% of the income from fishing activity. Finally, complementary species are those that are usually landed together with other more important species, or those that, whilst targeted at a given moment, do not make up a significant share of the income derived from fishing. Among the latter are also those with catch volumes that generally contribute very little to annual landings, or those that are caught sporadically and only report several tons. These categories are not static over the years. Often an essential species during a given year can become fundamental or even complementary the following year, and vice versa. Artisanal fisheries are dynamic, versatile, and adapt to the opportunities and needs of each year. But what determining factors make a species essential? Is it possible to quantify this degree of essentiality by means of a mathematical formula? Well, yes, almost anything is possible. And after an exhaustive analysis, it can be concluded that there are 3 factors of utmost importance to understand and quantify the fishing intensity exerted on a species. We will talk about the time spent catching it, the number of units that fish it, and the economic return obtained from it. Frequency, fleet recruiting, and income. Now then, to calculate the essentiality of a species, the relationship of these 3 variables is not strictly linear. That is, essentiality is not measured by the multiplication of frequency, recruiting, and income. It is somewhat more complex, where each of the factors provides a different relative essentiality, and the resulting mathematical formula relativizes and weights the relationship of the fishing importance of each of the species each year in a given fishing community. To determine how important a species is, it must be compared with the rest of the species caught in that same port. For this reason, for the calculation of these 3 determining factors, their importance is weighted by dividing it by an overall value of the entire fleet. Thus, frequency is a result of dividing the number of fishing days in which a species is caught by the number total catch days of all species. Fleet recruitment is the number of artisanal fishing units that fish a species divided by the total number of artisanal fishing units that are operational in the fishing community. And the income is to estimate relative incomes, dividing the income generated by each species by the income obtained from the species that generate the highest income levels. With these starting values, which are percentages that measure the relative importance of each species, the calculation of the essential indices relating to a given period, a fishing community, and each of the species caught begins. For a better understanding of the formulas of essentiality, I recommend carefully read the article referenced at the start of the presentation. The application of the formulas of fishing essentiality makes it possible to obtain graphs of this type. As you can see, in this example of a fishing community in 2019, 3 essential species were caught, 5 fundamental and 46 complementary. The essential index for each species is presented with a green, and its frequency, recruitment, and income index are broken down into several points of different colors. Other types of results are also shown, such as essential capacity and essential potential, but that is already material for other videos that you can find in La Escuela de Pescavable.com. Greetings and good sea.